So in these videos, we will be covering the religion of Islam, which is chapter 4 in your books. In these videos, we will be covering several aspects to Islam. First, let's go over some basic concepts you should know about Islam. Islam means surrender or submission. Allah is the one and only God that Muslims, those who practice Islamic faith, believe in. Allah is the God. Muslims also believe that prophets came to deliver Allah's message. The last of these prophets is Muhammad. Muhammad was born in Mecca in about 570 CE. In 610, Jibril, or Angel Gabriel, came to Muhammad with a revelation. He told Muhammad he was to be the messenger of Allah, the one God. Muhammad's message, which significantly differed from those in Mecca, was that there was only one God. Mecca was a place of many gods. Muhammad gained a following which included his family and friends. Some of these supporters were his wife, his two friends, Abu Bakr and Uthman, his cousin Ali, and former slave Zayd. Due to differences in beliefs in the Mecca community, life became tough for the newly founded Muslims. Muhammad and other Muslims moved to Medina in 622. This move is now referred to as the Hijra, or migration. However, Muslims had opposition here too, even after more people joined in the following of their faith. Arabs, Jews, and tribes from Mecca began battling the Muslims in Medina. Muhammad and his followers then returned to Mecca, recaptured it, and purified the Kaaba by removing statues of many gods. Muhammad died in 632, and his successors are called caliphs. The first caliph was Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr's successor was Umar, who ruled the longest of the first four caliphs. A committee of 6 people chose Uthman to be Umar's successor, and Uthman significantly impacted the publication and distribution of the Quran. However, Uthman did have problems within his administration and was killed by a rival faction. Ali became the 4th caliph. The Umayyad, members of Uthman's clan, didn't recognize Ali as caliph because he had been appointed by some who were responsible for Uthman's death. Uthman's cousin, Muawiyah, was also proclaimed caliph. Battles were fought between Ali and Muawiyah, but both sides eventually agreed to a non-partisan arbitration, and Muawiyah ruled as caliph. Ali didn't agree with this, so he tried to rule from Kufa, but lost some support. Ali was assassinated, and his supporters put his son, Hassan, as caliph. Hassan and Ali's supporters soon recognized Muawiyah as caliph. There are 2 types of Muslims, the Shia Muslims and the Sunni Muslims. Both believe and practice the same Islamic faith, but differ in who they believe should lead the Muslim community. Sunni Muslims support a caliphate and call their leaders caliph, while Shia support an imamate and call their leaders imam. Shia Muslims believe that authority and inspiration should be passed down through the descendants of Ali and be given the title of imam. Sunnis believe the guardianship of Shara, Islamic law, is the duty of the caliph, not necessarily a descendant. There are 3 different periods we will focus on today, the first being the classical period. In this period, there was a physical move from Medina to Damascus, and leadership was made up of others besides companions of Muhammad. By the time Ali died, Islam spread throughout the Arabian Peninsula. Within a century after the death of Muhammad, the Muslim state had expanded through the Byzantine Empire, North Africa, Spain, and France. Because conversion to Islam is not accomplished on command, it took the majority of people living in these countries a long time to become Muslim. The expansion of the Muslim state was challenging because during these times, communication over long distances was slow. Arabic became more widely used as an official language, and a unified culture began to emerge. With the expansion of the state, the Umayyad rule began to weaken. New groups of Muslims asserted the right to a greater voice in society and government. Opposition grew, and various groups came together to defeat the Umayyads. The Umayyad dynasty crumbled, and the Abbasid dynasty came to rule, establishing a new capital in Baghdad, which became one of the largest and most significant cities in the world. In the medieval period, Muslim civilization and culture flourished so much under Abbasid rule that it became known as the Golden Age of Islam. Baghdad became an important Islamic intellectual center. Scientific, literary, and philosophical works from Greek, Persian, and Indian sources were translated into Arabic at Baghdad's House of Wisdom. Many books were written on engineering, geography, astronomy, mathematics, and chemistry. Medicine was an especially important area of contribution, combining the classical traditions of Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian medicine with the advancements of skilled Muslim doctors. Muslim literature flourished as well. Poetry and stories were popular. Fine arts included elaborate geometric botanical designs and calligraphy, which is an artistic writing that is prevalent in Quranic verses. One of the most important and long-term contributions of Islamic civilization was the vast network of trade and communication. These trade routes would allow ideas, products, innovations, technologies, food crops, and people to migrate from place to place. This would pave the way for global linkages in the future. Politically, the Muslim state hadn't maintained unity. Soon after, Muslims began being exiled from Spain and several crusades followed. The golden age of Islam came to an end. The Mongols had captured China, Russia, and Central Europe and were headed for the Middle East. Later, there was a rise in the Ottoman Empire. By the beginning of the 17th century, the rise of Europe as an empire and the decline of the Ottoman Empire were apparent. The advance of Europe's economic, industrial, military, and political power contributed to the internal factors in the long, slow decline of Muslim societies. This decline was accompanied and accelerated by the loss of economic power due to shifting global trade patterns and industrialization. The political decline of Islam also brought about its social and moral decline. Reform movements from the 18th to the 20th centuries saw a marked rise in revivalism and reform movements. Islamic reform movements tended to go in two directions. One was an attempt to return to what they considered the pristine Islam found at the time of Muhammad and the early Muslim community in Medina. This reform meant returning to the literal teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah. A second direction for Islamic reform was to interpret Islam in the light of the social and historical reality of the day. The Quran is the most sacred book for Muslims. It contains a collection of Muhammad's revelations. After the Quran, the Sunnah is the second authentic source of authority for Muslims. Muslims believe that the words of the Quran are God's words and thus infallible. Quran means recitation. Because Muhammad was uneducated, he would memorize his revelations, and instead of writing them down, he would pass them down to his followers. The third caliph, Uthman, decided these revelations should be written down. He did not want the sacred words to be lost. Therefore, he compiled the written text, which became the Quran. There are 114 surahs, or chapters in the Quran. The surahs are neither in chronological order, nor are they arranged by subject or theme. It is common to memorize the Quran because it is a religious duty, and those who accomplish this task earn an honorary title of Hafiz. The Sunnah is what Muhammad approved and prohibited, as well as his words and deeds. Hadith is similar to the Sunnah. Hadith are the sayings and stories of Muhammad that are meant to form guidance for living out religion. Both the Quran and Sunnah go hand in hand. One needs both to fully understand and live as a Muslim.
Muslims have an official creed of Islam. This creed states the beliefs and declares a Muslim's submission to Allah. Muslims believe that Allah is the creator and the one and only real God. They believe in Allah's books, and they believe that all time is sacred because it is Allah's time. Through the dedication of prayer and worship of Allah, Muslims open themselves up to the will of their God and promise to live their lives in His favor. Muslims believe that Allah is all-loving and all-powerful. They believe He gives and takes life as well as judges every human being. The Quran teaches that Christian prophets were actually Muslim because they submitted to the will of God. The Quran also states that Muslims who spend time thinking about insignificant things are losing their relationship with Allah. The religion and culture of Islam sees no difference between the spiritual and temporal life. It simply believes in the life itself and the submission to Allah. The Islamic culture has several rituals and practices. Through the celebration of different holidays and festivals, Muslims highlight their submission and worship to Allah. Two important Islamic festivals are Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. Eid al-Fitr is the festival of breaking fast. During this festival, families come together in their best dress to celebrate the end of Ramadan, a month of fasting. Eid al-Adha celebrates Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his own son for the will of Allah. During this festival, Muslims slaughter an animal to signify their own willingness to sacrifice their lives for the will of Allah. Besides these festivals, Muslims also have holidays such as Ashura. Ashura is a Muslim holiday that marks the day that God freed Moses and the Hebrew people from slavery in Egypt. Because the behavior of Muslims follows the 5 Islamic pillars, they develop practices based on the laws set out by them. Throughout the day, Muslims are required to stop and pray at fixed times. Muslims also practice almsgiving, fasting, and take part in pilgrimages to Mecca because of the guidelines set forth by their prophets and the 5 pillars.